Good morning, everybody. I'm Ed Coburn, president of Cabot Wealth Network, and more relevantly for this purpose, co-chair of Renewed. Welcome. For those of you that haven't been to a Renewed event before, they're very participative. Feel free to ask questions. We will get to them when we can. There's a chat feature in Zoom, which we very much use. And Stephanie's just posted a note in there. Hey, Wayne. And feel free to post comments in there, questions. I will incorporate those into the main conversation as feasible, and then we will have a Q&A at the end. For that, I very much recommend using the reactions button and raising your hand, and also you can use the other little emojis to indicate your other relevant thoughts. So anyway, this is I think a really important topic when many of us got into this industry back in whatever year that was. We were a very direct marketing driven industry. And I would say at this point, there's still a lot of direct marketing that goes on in our industry, but on a dollar basis, I'm guessing significant majority of the dollars in our industry are driven from sales, not from direct marketing. And some of these sales efforts, and just to be clear today, we're not talking about media sales. We're not talking about selling ads and lead gen programs to advertisers. We're not talking about event sponsorships and sales for events. We are talking about selling access to content, what might have been what was often called group sales back in the day, and that's the term we used. Site licenses, multiple subscriptions, whatever it is. And when we're talking about that, we're not generally talking about, oh, I want to get 2 copies of something, or I want 2 seats, but sort of, bigger sales kinds of things, kind of efforts. So that's the subject of today. I think it's very important for our industry and for many companies. I think particularly smaller companies are still heavily dependent on direct marketing, and I think I think probably there are some cases where you're leaving money on the table, and hopefully this will inspire you. I'm joined today on the panel with Lisa McInturf from BVR, and I'm going to have each of them introduce themselves in just a moment. Chris Burke from Diversified, and Jen Schwartz from Access Intelligence. Lisa, I'm going to start with you and let you introduce yourself.
Great. Hello, everybody. I'm Lisa McInturf. I am the Chief Revenue Officer at Business Valuation Resources. Since we're talking sales, I oversee our sales team, which is comprised of 6 individuals and 1 business development person. And our primary market is we're selling data, content, training, news to the business valuation, those involved in the business valuation profession. So a lot of them are accountants that have gotten special designations to be certified for business valuation. So our customers are generally people at accounting or specific business valuation firms or consulting firms. And so about 70% now, it's gone up, but about 70% of our sales each year go through the sales channel. We also have, web sales and such that marketing does, but the bulk is definitely through our sales group. And so definitely got to keep those people busy and the sales coming in. So that's kind of a quick overview.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Lisa. Chris, I'm going to go with you next.
Great. Thanks, Ed. I'm Chris Burke. I am with FT Specialist US. I'm head of sales for a team there. Not Diversified. That's okay, Ed.
I'm total brain. I apologize. Yes, I knew that.
Lovely place as well, I'm sure.
Thank you.
My team, I oversee the sales team, head of sales. We have, or there are 10 that report directly to me. 8 of those are new sales reps, really dedicated to selling new sales, and 2 are largely dedicated to the renewals and the ongoing relationship. We serve multiple markets, financial market, insurance space. There are 11 publications, 10 of them actually are in this, are in the sales space with enterprise-wide licensing that we've talked about. This is the only life I've known. So I started here in 2007, and I did start in the event space, which we're not going to talk about. And then moved into renewals some years later after a bit of success. I really love that renewal space, working with clients for the long haul. After some years of that, start taking on some reports. And then late 2019, which was really a fun time, I took on the role of head of sales just as we hit the COVID era. So that's my background, a little bit of who we are.
All right. Great. Thank you, Chris. Jen.
Hey everyone, I'm Jen Schwartz. I'm the Divisional President of Access Intelligence's Industry and Infrastructure Group. The industry part of that includes healthcare, aerospace, chemical, energy, defense. So we are primarily at this point a large and medium-sized event and digital media company, although we do have some of our groups have a pretty high percentage of the revenue that comes from paid group sales and site licenses. We have in my particular group, we have 1 salesperson and 2 marketers that help assist with group and site sales, depending on we have an aerospace one and some in chemical. And then we also have a client services team that assists us with some renewals. And we have kind of a automated process that helps, keep track of when everyone's due. And we sort of, know ahead of time what's upcoming. But I would say, as far as this group goes, we do have a few very large accounts that account for quite a nice chunk of revenue. But for all intents and purposes, my colleagues, Chris and Lisa, my peers at other groups, they probably have even more than what we have. But I'm kind of on here to say that even if you don't have a large percentage of your revenue meeting this, it is easy to get started, and we have a lot of good tips. And a couple of my folks are on the call today as well from here. So
Terrific. Thanks, Jen.
Mhm.
Well, we're gonna start by talking about how the beginning of the sales process. How are you handling lead gen? How are you handling qualification? And I don't know if anybody has a particular desire to grab this and go first. Otherwise, Jen, I was going to start with you.
Sure. Yeah, so we may do it a little bit different. Like I said, we have some paid events, digital media. We also have paid newsletters. So we start a couple of different ways. A lot of times editorial contacts are key. Who are they talking to? Who are they writing about? Double checking that with our marketing team to see if those companies are in the mix. In some cases, if we have tangential verticals, like we have a defense and a nuclear division at our company, if there's a company that's in both of those verticals, we will go out and pitch to both of those sectors, both of those divisions within a company. And a lot of free trials are another way that our marketing team helps to take any single subscribers. We may cherry pick those for a trial to a larger group subscription based on how many, companies are in the mix. And then we also look at just overall market. You might want to look at, in our case, for our defense group, who are the top 100 contractors in the defense world, and do we have all 100 of them in some way, shape, or form? And if not, how do we get those contacts? And if so, how do we get deeper contacts within those organizations? So that's kind of how we start.
Great. And of course, there are going to be overlaps, but also it's not only that you do things differently, but of course, being in different industries, what's going to work is going to be important. So to the extent there's some overlap here, that's deliberate, because I think it's important for people to see where there are commonalities and where there are differences. Lisa, I'll go with you next.
Yeah, similar, we do proactive prospecting through the marketing team, looking like Jennifer reference, we have like the top 100 accounting firms. So we'll get those lists to look to see, sometimes we can get some indications on those that specialize and offer BD services, but we'll go through those lists, identify any firms that for some reason might not be on our list, new people, feed them into our prospecting system, that we have an onboarding program that kind of tries to warm them up before we kick them over to sales. We take advantage of free easing, a free weekly that goes out. People sign up for that, get into our system. So then we start, sending them some promotional information. One of the things we do is the marketing team has worked with the sales team to identify website behavior that they feel is indicative of someone that they would want to talk with, rather than just, who's clicking through an email. There's more actions that we combine in there. That is a part of a scoring system around leads that get to a certain point, and then we'll push those over to the sales team for follow-up. They're expected to do some prospecting on their own. The business valuation profession isn't growing hugely as far as adding new firms and such, but also making sure that they know who's playing at each firm. So we have a good idea of the potential size of a firm. And then we, as part of leads, any of the one-off purchases, we sell single issues or day passes on our website. Those are called out specifically for the sales team to reach out, introduce, make sure they're aware of all that BBR has to offer. And then we have some upgrade paths for crediting single purchases into annual subscriptions.
Great. And thank you, Lisa. And Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but FT Specialist, formerly Money Media, is only really just kind of starting to put its toe in the water as far as direct marketing for sales, right? I mean, as far as sort of selling individual subscriptions, it's really, you have really been entirely a sales driven in your subscriptions. Is that?
Yeah, not even much of a toe in the water. We have some instances where we're making adjustments to what we're offering. We're still selling it as a enterprise-wide license, if you will, but to an individual who owns their own company, so sole proprietor. So really, that's the only case where we have individual licensing. Lisa,
Okay.
I'm glad you said that there's still a bit of a focus on the reps prospecting for their own. I can get to that in just a moment. For us, obviously, the beginning of the process starts with quality proprietary content. We're absolutely nothing without it. So everything our really smart editorial managing editors and teams do, they set us up for success. But the next step there is the marketing team. They jump in, and our lead gen process is really from trials. We have a host of emails. There's standard sort of wide range emails that go out on a regular basis. We've been doing that successfully for many years. We're now pivoting to a significant amount of paid search and social, again, just to drive engagement, largely to drive trial lists. Then there's sets of emails that go out that are more detailed. They're one-to-one campaigns for various reasons. And again, either driving trial lists or encouraging folks, which I think you touched on as well, to jump onto our free access, which is a news brief once a week for most pubs. That gives just a little bit of a taste, but is not even quite a trial. For me, thinking about lead gen and what really makes it successful to move into selling groups, and selling enterprise-wide licensing, it's not as much about what we do in those beginning phases. And I have a lot of faith in my marketing team and the editorial team before them to get to that point. It's what my team does once that lead comes in. And what are we doing with that lead to connect them to others inside of their department, inside of the company. So for me, it's really the key bit here is that most of our reps are establishing relationships with key decision makers, even in advance of there being a trial list, so that when a trial list comes in, they have somebody they can kind of continue to go back to. They're looking at connecting new leads to other existing trial lists. They're looking at connecting those new trial lists to former past trial lists. We're looking at our closed losts. Who did we work with 6 months ago, a year ago, whatever it might be, connecting those folks together. So it's really every new lead is just like one little step, and then that triggers just a host of outbound activity, which is a lot of that prospecting that my team would then have to do.
Great. Yeah, thank you. As soon as you generate a lead, one of the things that's critically important in this is how you think about pricing, and how you approach giving someone a price. When I used to be involved with a licensing with a company where we did a lot of content licensing, the salesperson used to joke that you'd throw out a price, and if there wasn't any disapproving, scowling faces looking back at you, you quickly add per month. But I suspect pricing is a little more scientific than that. So, Chris, how do you start thinking about pricing with these trial lists?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Our licensing has always been enterprise-wide. It will internally always be enterprise-wide. We'll refer to it as company-wide, enterprise-wide for everybody there. Externally, we're starting to, and I say starting like in the last few weeks, even this afternoon, we have a workshop. Think about the language we're using externally when we're talking to our customers or prospects. And although the license will still be enterprise-wide, shifting to thinking about terms that are less aggressive sounding, that are easier for an individual or a small group to make a decision on. So talking about the license as a group license, as not even a license, but as group access. I don't have that fleshed out yet. We're working on it. But that said, from a pricing standpoint, we're looking at an average price for most of our sales in the $6,000 to $7,000 range. So it's not very high. Our growth comes from the renewals, the year-over-year renewals. So, for example, a client that may have started with us 15, maybe 20 years ago, even, they may have started at most at the low 5 figures, 10, 15,000 or so. But through regular renewals, they're easily over 50,000. We have some clients in the low 6 figures as well. Not getting into too much detail. So it really is about finding a fair price that is comfortable for a relatively small, medium-sized group in the first year, and then encouraging readership growth throughout the year-to-year process, so that we can see strong renewals.
Yeah, great. So I envision that as being get your foot in the door, become indispensable to them, and then you have much more leverage to be able to raise your price.
Yes, exactly it.
And I would say, for those of you who had the good fortune to see Dan Fink's session at the Renewed Summit, maybe 2 years ago, talking about renewal pricing, what a phenomenal session. And I'm thinking we may have to have another webinar just on that. So we won't get into the renewal pricing, because I think that's a sort of separate conversation. This is really about taking people who aren't customers and getting them to become customers, or who are small customers, and upselling and cross-selling or whatever. Lisa.
Yeah, so VDR, we're kind of we're in the middle of historically, we've got our licenses, our single user licenses, our pricing is posted on the website. One of the, historically we've sold individually, right? Then we have what we call site licenses, which are multi-seat licenses at an organization, but each person has their own individual login, that type of thing. One of the difficulties that we've had over the years is selling the multi-seat, but getting that right size for the number of people. We see sharing of credentials and such, and it's hard to, it's difficult for sales to have that conversation and convince, you actually need 5 licenses, where they're thinking, no, I'll just have 1. I'll have my analysts go in, they'll pull the data and they'll send it to the 4 other people. And so there's always been kind of a little bit of a battle trying to figure out how to have that conversation, and not immediately have the customer go immediately, that's 4 times that license price, and that scares them off. We, over the past years, have come up with step pricing. So for additional seats at a firm, we have discounts, but we don't post any of that on the website. It's more encouraging people to contact us for the multi-seat. Gives the salesperson an opportunity to really learn more about that account, how they function, who's involved. Some of the other language, words that we're testing out a lot, like Chris too, is the who's benefiting from the information. And so where we are now is we are really focused on, we want to move, like Chris, to firm pricing, but also people get nervous, like you might have a Markham, who is a very large organization. They have a department that does BV. And so when you say enterprise, they're like, whoa, we only have, and so it's like group, your BV group, your group size, and getting a sense of that, and testing out some new pricing based on that, knowing that there's the main heavy users that we would normally charge, the full license, but all those benefiting people, how can we put together a pricing that the sales team can work off of, so that we kind of keep some standardization across organizations as things are being quoted and such, because we know people move organizations, so we want to keep consistency. And so how do you give the sales team guardrails, but give them the flexibility to play in there to manage based on what they're learning and working with the customer on?
Yeah. Thank you, Lisa. And I want to comment, both you and Chris talked about the sort of how we label this. And I know in some of the conversations we had leading up to this, Chris, I think it was you that had said, you can have a very large multinational that might be a division of another larger multinational. And if you're trying to sell one branch or whatever, and you're talking about enterprise-wide, they may think, oh my God, the thought of trying to sell our corporate people, let alone their corporate overlords, it's a non-starter, I'm walking away. So you want the language to be descriptive, but not intimidating to prospects. And that's, I particularly want to call that out, since you both referred to it in different ways. Getting that language right is an art. I suspect. So I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that. And also, Jen, I want to get your thoughts in thinking about pricing, but if any of you have any thoughts on that language issue.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add on the back of what you just said, that you're absolutely right. These two behemoths that one owns the other, they might very comfortably be willing to pay $10,000 to make that decision for themselves on their own. And in total, we could get 2 separate $10,000 licenses. And it would be much harder if we just told one of them that they have to put in place a license for $10,000 to include everybody. So it kind of, it benefits us in multiple ways. It's easier to get the sale, potentially, we'll see. That's what we're seeing, hopefully. And it's much easier for the client.
Yeah. Interesting. Thanks, Chris. Jen, I wanted to get your thoughts on pricing.
So the way we kind of break up the two in our organization is a little bit different. To us, a site license is tied to the entire company, and it's usually an IP address. So IP address access for everyone. And anything else is a group, right? So if you don't have the entire company on the IP address, then it's a group. It could be 3 people, it could be 100 people, it's based on individual users. Typically, the pitch for us on a site license is we do in person. We go to the organization, we go to their headquarters, we bring in our editorial team, we try to meet with their competitive teams. A lot of these people have their internal competitive analysis teams that are keeping track of folks in the industry. We also go to their communications departments. We engage their senior leadership. On the group side, it's a little bit more personalized. We've had a lot of success in the past going direct to the CEO or the very top person of whatever division, talking to them about how their organization has been in our newsletter, and how they're not a subscriber and they've now missed out on something that the competitors are reading, but also giving them the option for their group, their own team, to have access. And a lot of times, believe it or not, the CEOs at these larger companies, they don't actually get a lot of personalized emails. Usually it's everyone below them that does. So when they actually get one, they will forward it to their team. And what do you do when you get a email from your CEO? You respond. So that's a good way to kind of get that. As far as it goes, I do have one of our sales reps on the call as well, so he can chime in if he'd like. But we do the typical volume discounts. We have a single site price, and then volume discounts for however many more you get, depending on how many are in the group. And then always try to pitch several options, not just one. So in terms of, maybe it's a 10, maybe they've asked for 5, but you give them a 5, a 10, a 15, or what have you. So, which I know everyone does probably. But that's kind of how we do it at our company.
All right, great, thanks. And so having said, we're not really talking about the renewals side of sales, but the people that are doing these initial sales, what are they responsible for? Are they, are you taking an account management approach where they bring them in and they nurture them and they're in touch with them all along the way? They just getting them to the door or in the door, and then other people take them on for other things. Lisa, how are you handling that at BVR?
We are in year 1 of a transition here. And so just to start this year, we have divided our accounts into what we call growth accounts versus maintenance accounts. So half of the team, we have the team organized basically geographically, for the most part, three areas. And then within each area, there is a strategic account manager and a account manager. And so growth accounts that we have identified based on what we know, potentially like examples are firm size. We know that, they're a 20-person firm and we look and we've got, 2 licenses. Okay, we know we've got to right size that. There's growth opportunity there. If we know about acquisition or merger activity, there's some categories of what would qualify an account to be a growth account. And so we divide up the accounts that way, and the salesperson is responsible for, renewals, new sales. The expectation is with every renewal, there is the add-on. We're looking to right size, whether that be, we call it internally going deep and wide, wide with the product line. We have multiple products. And so making sure that our pillars are represented, as well as making sure it's right sized for the size of the organization. So really getting to know how the organization is structured, works, that type of thing. But each salesperson pretty much handles it. Leads come in, they work them, they close the sale, and then they're into the renewal cycle as well.
Yep. All right. Thank you. Jen, how do you approach that?
Yeah, for renewals. So we
well, just sort of account management, right?
Yeah.
Ongoing account management
Yep.
versus sell
Yep.
them and
go. Yep.
put them over the
So
wall. Yeah.
our sale, whether it's the marketing person and like I said, in one of our groups, our marketing person does the groups. But whether it's our salesperson or marketing, they typically are the ones that bring in the new accounts. They keep that relationship going. It then gets put into our system, and our client services team has touch points during the year with them as well. And when it's time for renewal, like I said, we typically have 2 or 3 months before there's that notification to everyone that like, hey, this account's coming up. But it is on the salesperson and the marketer who bring in the account. They're responsible for keeping that relationship going. And if we really use our client services team as a touch point throughout the year for that additional outreach. But that's how we do it. But again, we don't have as many in some cases as maybe some of the folks on this call do. So we don't actually have to separate out that piece.
All right, thank you. Chris?
Yep. Yeah, ours is very straightforward. The new sales reps are solely responsible for bringing in the new sale, and then it stops there. That said, they can either be like the sole salesperson for a particular pub, or in some cases, there are multiple reps that sell across multiple publications that are related. And that's so that they can own the relationship with a particular company to hopefully assist with a cross-sell effort. So, for example, we have now 4 pubs in the insurance space. And while many of those companies might be only interested in one publication or another because of their specific interest, many at the top of the MSA or the market size analysis have an interest in 2, 3, or all 4 publications. So it makes sense for the reps to have a relationship across them. Those cross sales or dual sales that happen at the same time are much more likely in that instance. But once they sell it for the first time, either one or potentially a 2-year agreement, then it shifts over to the renewals. I won't get into too much detail on that, but I will add that we have 2 renewals reps. One of them is more focused on the newer publications and the other on the more mature publications. The one that's focused on the newer publications has a bit more experience and is often seeking higher increases because it's in the first year or multiple years of the licensing. So it's higher increases with more explanation that needs to be had and stuff like that. So there's a little bit of split there. That's how we see our growth more so.
Yep.
That's it otherwise.
And I assume across all of you that compensation varies depending on what they're responsible for. Obviously, if I'm responsible for renewals, I assume I'm seeing some action on the renewals, and if I'm not, and maybe so actually, Chris, question: your people who are responsible for the upfront sale, do they get any participation on subsequent years?
They don't. Ours is set up in a way that, generally speaking, we're looking at about 2/3 base, 1/3 commission for the new sales reps for on target earnings. I think the most motivating piece of the compensation package for the new sales reps is a potential to earn a really high amount on new sales, especially if they go over their goal within a quarter. We have our system set up where each rep does have a annual goal. Let's just pretend it's 400,000. But instead of waiting for them to hit 400,000 for the year at some point, hopefully to hit that escalated commission rate, we reset it each quarter. For example, if Q1 they were to sell $40,000, it starts over at Q2, and if in Q2 they were to sell $120,000, they earned their expected rate for the first 100 and a much higher rate, sometimes double, for the additional 20,000 within Q2. The reason that works so well for us is because there are ebbs and flows, ups and downs, peaks and valleys for sales reps. It's just the nature of the beast. And by resetting it quarterly, it allows them to still feel motivated if they're coming off of especially if it's the first quarter of the year and you have a tough quarter. Maybe you have a really strong sales rep who just crushed it in December. They were already at their goal and they got a whole bunch more in. And it left their pipeline a bit thin in January, and they barely made the goal or didn't make the goal in Q1. And they're motivated to restart in Q2. So for my team, I think that's the most important bit.
Yeah, so they don't give up on the year because they know
Yeah.
there's I can't, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. And so you're really hiring sharks who are constantly out there hunting and looking to eat now.
Yeah.
Not sort of the not people that are looking for long term. That's more the renewal people that are looking for the
Yeah, very, very different compensation, obviously much
yeah.
lower percent, 90% plus of every business is renewable. So it's still well compensated, but extremely different. And I think for the purpose of this conversation here, just focus on the new sales compensation.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Jen or Lisa, anything you want to add on that thought?
We have, well, along with the change in the territories, have rolled out a new compensation structure. Previously, again, each salesperson, responsible for both bringing in new sales and their renewals. So what we had done in the previously was, compensation rates based on the type of sale, renewal rates or a brand new or add-on person, add-on product. There were different rates associated. Definitely, higher rates for the new, trying to promote that. But the sales team, definitely could do very well by just renewals. And so trying to figure out a way with the new structure and account focus and really focusing on growing the accounts, going away from breaking it down based on the type of sale, but giving them annual goals, quotas to work towards, and then building in an accelerator. Ours isn't quarterly. Ours is at the, you reach this point, and after that, anything else is, you get the accelerated rate on that gets trued up at the end of the year. So because we have throughout the year, one territory will, like, Q1's their busy time, another one it's Q4. Some of it depends upon, just historical renewal times there throughout the year. And so that's been, we set a goal that, factors in their renewal pool, but then what we want as an organization, what level of growth we're looking in, we build that into the quota as well.
Great.
Yep, and we do same, typically salary plus commission, sometimes tiered or sometimes a bonus, depending on what the plan is and what other portfolio business they have. Because like I said, at our organization, this is a smaller portion of it. So a lot of times our sales folks and marketers are responsible for driving event revenue, attendee revenue, other sales sponsorships, sales exhibits. So it's just one piece of that.
Yeah.
And I will say too, we do monthly contests though amongst the team. And so it's based on a percentage attainment of their individual goals. So it kind of helps level the playing field a little bit. And so, trying to get a little bit of the competitive nature going on there, and then also acknowledging top, bringing in the brand new, so that is constantly too at the top, that's a priority. So acknowledging that and seeing who can bring the most in.
Yeah. Oh, great. Yeah. Thank you. I'm going to end with one feature, and then we're going to get to questions. But one of the things that I think is amazing about the renewed community that you don't find in a lot of other industry communities is the frank, happy to disgorge details on how badly I've screwed up in the past. And I think that, not only is it a bonding thing, but the reality is there isn't a business out there that that's gotten to where they are without stubbing their toe. I mean, Apple had the Lisa. I mean, pick a successful company. You can. So anyway, I'd love to get, and I think for people that maybe not, maybe looking at you guys thinking, oh my God, you've got your act together and everything's amazing and we could never do that. Where have you stubbed your toe? And also while you're doing that, then I'd love to hear what do you consider a sort of big success that you've had in the sales area, something that you did that really worked out well. And Lisa, I'll start with you.
I think as far as one of the things that's hard, I think, is when you're looking to make changes and you've got existing patterns of business and your customers are trained a certain way, it is really hard to get them out of that, as well as you're also salespeople as well. You know, they get comfortable, they get into their normal routines. And so I think when you're looking as an organization to make a change, that can be hard. And so I think making sure that you are able to frame to the salesperson like a really, you know, the big picture and how they fit in and how they see that what they're being asked, their goals tie into the overall company goals, and really working with them and making sure that you're giving them the tools to feel comfortable about what you're asking them to do. I think helps things move along quicker, because otherwise you're going to have people that are going to kind of maybe not fully buy in, and it's going to take longer for your team to coalesce around the new way of business and new practices and that type of thing. But I think if you do it well, there's also then this sense of personal development on the individual salesperson's side, where, you know, you're opening them up to a new way, and then, you know, acknowledging their successes, and then that enthusiasm builds within the team. So I think my whole thing is like looking at managing change. It's a lot, and you have to be really ready to put the time and effort in to help guide that along. You can't just announce it and think that everybody's going to buy in, but you've got to build in that time and the individual coaching, because everybody's going to look at it differently as well.
Yeah. All right. Good thoughts. Chris.
Sure, thanks, Ed. Geez, such a long list to choose from sometimes as far as biggest failures. I would say one that absolutely comes to mind, and it's a big one. It also sort of pivots then into one of the successes, I feel like. I guess from 2020 forward, we went into this largely remote, if then sort of hybrid model where people come into the office. And very long story, very short. Over those years, there were, in a relatively short period of time, there were a couple of cases where I had just entirely lost track of the amount of work a particular rep is doing or not doing. So much to the fact that I had one rep some weeks, if not more, into having not done almost anything. And there was a situation where another one had taken on a full second job, a whole second full-time job. And we don't ever want to be in a position where we're, not getting everything we're expecting from our team members. And more so, I don't want to be in a position as a manager of that team of not realizing that for several weeks or more. We want to be able to see that within days or a week or something, so that we can help right the ship, see what's going wrong, fix the situation. If it's 4 weeks in, it's too far gone to fix that situation. You have to move on with who you had. So I would say that one of the business successes was the response to that, and that is finding a way to really balance trust with accountability. And I always had what I thought was a very smart 30, 60, 90-day plan for onboarding for new hires, which included all the things you need to do to ramp up. And then I left it with the reps that, yes, this is something that you'll be held accountable to forever. We didn't really revisit it much. Now, and here's for me, the takeaway here is developed and put in place a really strong, robust standard operating procedure. And that's something that is used for onboarding, for ongoing. And then if you ever get to a point where you're not getting everything from a rep that you feel like you ought to, and you've exhausted all sort of options that you feel like you need to put on a performance plan, something you can refer to as well. So it's helpful across the gamut there. But when building an SOP, you really want to make sure that the SOP covers the process of the day-to-day, the week-to-week of what a rep does from soup to nuts. You want to include in that SOP measurables, figures, very specific things, expectations. It doesn't have to be it must be this much always, but at least minimum. So minimum number of calls you're expecting, minimum number of times you're expecting a rep to source new clients in a certain way through LinkedIn or another format, whatever those might be. It's important to be transparent with the reps as you're developing your SOP, get their feedback. You're working together on figuring out the best practices for this SOP based on what works best. So it's with them that you're developing it. And then lastly, just having regular sort of accountability meetings with your team members, revisiting what's in the SOP. Somebody's falling a little bit behind. It might just be simply because they're forgetting that they need to send a second email that includes content every time. And it's important as a manager that you're getting nitty gritty with them, especially if they're falling behind. And then you can use it to hold them accountable. So developing that SOP, it's been so helpful. That happened for me nearly almost a year ago, and there's always more to learn from it, but I'll leave it there.
All right, great. Thanks, Chris. Jen.
Yeah, I would say like 15 years ago, the strategy and the current thinking back then was sort of more punitive in nature, right? We focused a lot on who was taking advantage of our groups and threatening, action if they didn't, kind of come around to compliance. And that's still key and important, but that shouldn't be the relationship you have with your customer. And, we kind of, in one particular case, it sort of messed up the relations on a lot of different levels for things beyond the subscription. So we don't do that anymore to that extent. And really what I'd say the last 10, 15 years, the real focus has been on the value, right? The value prop for why somebody would want this for their team. And our sales person on the aerospace side is excellent at this. They not only get more people each year on a group, so that helps increase the overall count revenue, but they get more publications within that single market for those people to be looking at. And then in some cases, they get publications across markets. So there's a whole nother group in the organization, another brand that can benefit from that. So that's really where we focus now, is sort of what's the strategic vision and how are we going to tackle it from that standpoint versus, hey, let's catch the people that are maybe not being compliant.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks. This is great. We've already got questions coming in, so I want to we have time to get to some of those. So I want to get that. And the first one I want to start with is William Jefferson Black was asking about anticipated split between base and incentive comp, and he's talking about at their organization someone with an expected income of about 150,000 that they kind of expect 60-40 base and variable. And any thoughts on that, Jen?
No, I mean, it's so different, depending, like I said, we have so many different products and places that I don't have that off the top of my head.
Lisa.
Yeah. We with our recent change, we were more heavily focused on the commission portion, and so we are getting that more in line with more around like the 60-40 mark. But before the base was much lower, and so we've upped the base and put commissions is not as much of the variable as it used to be. So
All right. And Chris.
Yeah, I hit on this briefly. Our it's roughly 2/3, 1/3, but at least 60-40, at most closer to 70, but right around 65-35.
Yeah. All right. And there's some additional thoughts on this in the comments, people. But that it seems like people are in sort of that range. I wanted to get to Andy Burden. Andy, are you on? Do you want to come on and ask your question? Oh, I'm sorry, William. I realized you were there. I should have had you on. My apologies.
It was less of a question, more of a comment. But when I'm meeting with people who are selling established subscriptions, potentially moving into data as a service, what they're focusing on rather than seat licenses is the sense of use cases. And within each use case, you'd assign things like size of company, firmographics, technographics and stuff. But let me give you a very simple example that where you've got that analyst serving, I don't know, 5-10 people within a firm, the use case is that they're a super user and they're serving different functions within that firm, and therefore the pricing and the value is different. So I just wanted to add that to help rather than ask a question.
So, Andy, in those cases, are you effectively kind of metering the usage?
You can do that, or you can simply look at the value of have a conversation around it. So it does depend on the sophistication of your systems.
Yes.
So you can set up a scope, some of which even if you've got relatively advanced systems like some of the DAS and price reporting agencies, essentially they boil down to having a fair play or gentleman's agreement. But once you've been able to set that up within a corporation, you're able to have a conversation which is less compliance, more pointing out kindly that their demand is exceeding the scope.
Right. Yeah. As Chris mentioned, Chris, when you were talking about sort of the renewal process and having to step people up faster, that can have some sales challenges. And Andy, I suspect that approach has some significant sales challenges too. But I think there are lots of good models, and then they all have challenges to some extent.
Yeah, this is more nascent, so it's what people are trying to move towards, and it definitely reflects value rather than talking pricing.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll add, we don't look at that on the new sales side based on their actual like usage during the trial to set the price, but on the renewal side, our systems are really smart. Then if it recognizes basically this super users or a large number of high users, that's where we'll have our more senior renewals rep go in and make fair adjustments that are incrementally higher. Instead of 10%, they might see 15 to 20% increase for that year.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. And thanks, Andy. Stephanie, I'm going to ask you to come on because you had a couple of questions, and while you're coming on camera, I'm going to point out that you had shared a note about Mike Weinberg, a sales training guru, who talks about the single biggest thing you can do to improve sales is accountability meetings. So she was amplifying what you were saying, Chris, and there's a link there to Mike Weinberg's podcast in the chat if anybody wants to hear that. Thanks for sharing that, Stephanie. Stephanie Williford, who many of you may know is the other co-chair of Renewed, told me that their sales effort is relatively nascent, but they recently closed their first 6-figure sale. So pretty freaking awesome there, Stephanie. And
I'm clapping my salesperson, not myself, because I didn't have a whole lot to do with it. Also, thank you for making me get on camera right after my workout.
Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot. Sorry, but you had 2 questions, so I wanted to bring you on to ask those.
Yeah, one was kind of a technical question, maybe better for offline, but I am interested if others are getting asked more for other ways of accessing the content other than like IP or username and password. So that was one. And then my other question was more around, I guess, a kind of coaching guidance. We do have a nascent sales program, I guess, and largely it's just been for the last few years, whatever inbound leads we get, we follow up on. So I'd love any tips on getting those that are, maybe new to sales or even that have been doing it for years, but are a little reluctant to prospect on their own. What's maybe some quick and dirty, easy, less scary ways to start with prospecting, and maybe suggestions on simple goals. Is it do you set the bar like, okay, let's just try to get a couple a week or something like that. Any tips on getting started with prospecting was my main question.
I would say, like, I think Lisa mentioned it before as well, but like, figuring out who those top organizations are that you're targeting and making sure you have in-depth people within each of those, as well as simply reading what you're putting out and figuring out who's in there, who are the companies you're talking about, who are the new technology, what are the new technologies. And then within those, you can find out who the competitors are, right? So if you're talking about Pfizer or something, and who are the other competitors in that space that the person can go after, and then really just kind of having them focus in. Maybe it's a weekly prospecting pipeline that you request from them in terms of, I want X number of new names from these organizations, or I want you to go X number of people deep in the organization so you have more than the one contact.
And I think too, one thing, they have, especially younger salespeople, they might have this list of prospects. It's like intimidating, like, I don't want to sound stupid on the phone, that type of thing. And so we've also taken to providing plays, like staying sharp each month, like just like, it's not necessarily about selling per se a product, but things that we know or have heard about in the profession that gives them, if they have a conversation, they can, a tidbit or show some knowledge of what is going on in the industry. So it's not directly like, I want to sell you this, but hey, I'm hearing this. Are you seeing that? Just to get the conversation going. And so I think figuring out some questions with prospects that they can ask, and then the prospect gets talking, it makes it so much easier and they're more comfortable. And then also, if you are fortunate and have more seasoned person on the sales team, getting the group together and just brainstorming amongst themselves, what works for you when you're reaching out, because different personalities gravitate to different approaches. And so I think putting that and having a brainstorming kind of get some wheels turning for each individual as well.
Yeah,
Great.
it's really smart points. I don't have too much to add. We typically have learned to hire somewhat seasoned sales reps because there is a significant amount of prospecting. But one thing that I did when I first started, now 17 years ago at the company, Dan, my boss, who is on this call somewhere, and other of my managers at the time, similar to what Jen said, start with the content that we're producing. Who are we? Who are we writing about? What are we saying? Nice things, and reach out to those folks, because it's a little more comfortable. I would say any list that we share with a rep to help them feel comfortable with outbound prospecting, a relatively defined list, each list being relatively defined, makes it a bit easier because you have some parameters. This list is people who are of at least the size of a company, they've engaged in the content in one manner or another, so that every conversation has some commonalities to it, so that you're not resetting and feeling you have to every call just start from zero and not have a bit of framework to start with.
Yeah, great.
Thank you guys so much. That's really helpful. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you for your questions, and everybody that presented questions. Thank you for attending. We are right out of time, and I just want to say thank you to the panelists. This was fantastic. This session will be available on demand, so you can share it with your teammates, or you can go back and watch it again. I also want to mention that, to me, the single biggest benefit of Renewed is it's about networking. And I would say, I'm going to volunteer the three panelists. If you have questions about something they said as you're thinking about it later, reach out to them and ask. Your question may maybe spark some new idea for them, and whatever. We all learn by sharing and paying it forward. So if you want to reach out, you can always reach out to Lindsay Lee, our executive director, and she can put you in touch with anybody. So make use of that. That's what this is all about. Thank you, everybody. That concludes the program, and we'll see you all at the next one.
Thanks, Ed.
All right,
Thanks,
thank you.
Thanks all.